are behind you than in front of you. On behalf of the Jewish United Fund, it is important that you know and that you understand our organized Jewish community is with you to ensure that you live your final years with all appropriate dignity and respect. It's the very least that we can do for you, and we will find all appropriate resources to ensure that that continues. And when we talk about the legacy of the survivors, we need to do so in the context of the people in this room and the families and the strong and vibrant Jewish community here and the strength of the state of Israel. It is important that all of us collectively band together to build Jewish life here, to strengthen the state of Israel, and to assure Jewish continuity and identity for generations and generations to come. And that will be the legacy of those who are part of the survivor community and will help us ensure that we never forget. Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce you to the featured speaker. Regine Schlesinger is a second-generation child of survivors. Her parents, Margot is here as well, her parents were Schindler Juden, and she is here to speak, 40-year veteran reporter for WBBM 780, and I'm very proud to introduce her tonight.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, everybody. It is such an honor for me to speak at this event today. While Yom HaShoah commemorations now are ubiquitous, this one, founded by Sheérit HaPleitah, the survivors themselves so many years ago, was one of the first of its kind. Charles Lipschitz was integral in getting this started. He, thank God, is still here with us today. I remember hearing the powerful testimony of Elie Wiesel for the first time at this ceremony decades ago. So I indeed feel deeply honored to speak this year for the second generation, the children of Holocaust survivors. In recent years, we have taken to calling the Americans who lived through the Depression and then fought World War II the greatest generation. It is no exaggeration. The 11 million Americans who went to war literally saved the world. They fought and died to end the barbarism that Nazism aimed to impose on the entire world. Together with Russian and British troops, the Americans were the first to provide eyewitness accounts of the destruction they found when they liberated the few remaining survivors of the Nazi death camps. Many of the American soldiers never made it home. In just a few weeks, the world will mark the 70th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. The seemingly endless field of crosses and stars of David that mark the battlefields of the beaches of Normandy stand as a stark reminder of their sacrifices. Those who did survive came back to the United States, not looking for accolades or to be treated as courageous heroes that they were, but merely to quietly resume their lives and live as ordinary citizens. As children of survivors, we owe them a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid. They saved our parents and thereby saved us. What then to call the decimated survivors of history's most barbaric atrocity, the Sheérit HaPleitah, the remnant of European Jewry, that somehow, against all odds, managed to survive the attempt to wipe them off the face of the earth? People like my parents, Margot and Haskell Schlesinger. They were saved through one of the world's righteous, Oskar Schindler, and through the Russian soldiers who came into the camp at Brindlitz on May 8, 1945, and told them finally they were free. My father, of blessed memory, died in 1999, having lived 60 years more than Hitler would have allowed him. I am blessed to have my mother still here, defying those who wanted her dead for no reason other than that she was a Jew. And I would like my mother to stand. Others have given them the name the holiest generation, and I certainly agree. Not for their suffering in and of itself, but for how they rebuilt their lives after the liberators finally came. In his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, Rabbi Harold Kushner cites the example of Noah from the Bible. Noah saw his world destroyed by the flood, and when the ark finally came to rest on dry land, he emerged to start a new world. His first reaction? Unable to deal with the destruction of his world, he planted a vineyard and immediately got drunk. That was how he spent the rest of his days. One could have imagined that would also be the reaction of the Holocaust survivors who emerged from the ashes to find their old world gone forever. Many, like my father, had lost their entire families. Only one brother, my Uncle Moshe, was left, and he had lost his wife and 3 beloved children to the gas chambers at Auschwitz. Although he remarried and hoped to start a new family, he never had more children, and to the end of his life remained a shell of a man, empty, constantly mourning all he had lost and blaming himself for surviving when they did not. My parents were more fortunate. They had each other and my mother's 4 brothers and 1 sister who had escaped before the Nazi campaign of genocide had gone full force. Like so many of the survivors, my parents came to this country, which finally opened its doors years too late, and embraced them. Although they were history's ultimate victims, they came expecting no one to give them anything, and indeed, no one did. Yet they built new lives on the ashes of all they had seen destroyed. Many came here with nothing, and through hard work became successful. They were forever grateful to a country that offered them freedom and opportunity. I can hardly imagine the courage it took for those who had lost spouses and children to begin anew and start new families. After seeing children and babies murdered, who could have such resilience and hope? And yet, somehow, they did. This is what was written about the DP camps. A few months after the liberation, there was a great upsurge in founding new families. Many weddings were held, and after a few months, there were thousands of pregnant women in the camps. In 1946 to 48, the highest birth rate in the world was that in the survivors' camps. Up to 700 children were born in the camps in some months. Care of the mothers and children became one of the most important necessities. My mother couldn't believe that after the starvation and affliction she had suffered during the war, she would ever have children. She was overjoyed a year after liberation when she conceived a child, and in 1947, my oldest sister, Aileen, was born, weighing a mere 2 pounds, but otherwise healthy. 2 years later came my sister Sabine, and finally I was born in 1951. Our parents, despite all they had been through, or perhaps because of it, devoted themselves to their children. We were the greatest priority in their lives. They knew how easily everything could be taken away. Money, possessions, businesses, those meant nothing. They understood what was most important in life, and to them, that was their children. They treasured us above all else. And they imbued our lives with meaning. Many children of survivors were named for murdered relatives. We knew our namesakes only through our parents' heartbroken references to them. We hadn't even seen pictures of them because no photographs existed anymore. We grew up knowing that somehow our lives represented a continuation of those lives that no longer existed. We were the new links in a long chain that had nearly been forever broken, and we took that as a sacred obligation. When I was blessed to have my own children, I named them as well for my uncle's children, whose lives had been stolen from them before they had a chance to live them. My sisters and I were fortunate that from the time we were very young, my parents talked to us about what they had been through. Some of the earliest words I can remember hearing as a child were lager and creek. Lager was how they referred to the camps, and in the days before we'd ever heard the word Holocaust or Shoah, my parents talked about the creek, the war. Time was divided into 3 segments: things that had happened before the creek, those that happened during the creek, and those after. Many survivors never told their children anything about their experiences, either because it was too painful for them to talk about them, or because they wanted to shield their children from the pain. For those children, it was much harder. They grew up sensing but not knowing the details of the burden their parents carried with them forever. And yet, most of the children of survivors I know grew up to become well-adjusted, productive people, many of them accomplished professionals. My sisters and I were determined that because of how much our parents had already suffered, we would never do anything to cause them more pain. Years ago, a psychologist named Helen Epstein, herself a child of survivors, set out to do the first study of our generation, the second generation. The result was a book called Children of the Holocaust. For me, when I read it, it was a revelation. I discovered that all of us shared the same feelings and values, no matter how different our backgrounds. The common thread that binds us, our parents' Holocaust experiences. Many of the children quoted in the book saw their parents in ways that most children normally don't. One said when he was younger, he thought his parents were angels. As he put it, "I thought they were more than human. They were different than other people because they had known the taste of inhumanity that others didn't know." Another said, "I am in awe of my parents. I often wonder if I could have survived myself, and I doubt whether I could have. Being their child has given me a certain depth, a seriousness about life that most people can't possibly have. I'm aware of evil in the world, and I'm not complacent. I feel it requires an active struggle to prevent a revival of the sort of thing that led to the murder of my family." He adds, "My background has very much influenced my choices in life." Many of the children profiled in the book are in the helping professions: social work, teaching, psychology, medicine. My sister is a psychologist. My other sister went into teaching. I became a journalist, all because we wanted to make the world a better place. It is a tribute to their parents that the children were determined to turn the tragedy of their parents' lives into something positive to make the world a better place. All of us children of survivors owe our parents a tremendous debt. They had the courage to start anew after seeing their world destroyed. I would like to conclude with a piece written a few years ago by a psychiatrist, a child of survivors, named Isaac Stephen Hirschkopf. I came across it on the website aish.com. It was entitled "The Holiest Generation" and was subtitled, "Who could define what it meant to be a survivor? I learned the answer from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein." Hirschkopf writes about growing up within a community of survivors, all of them with numbers tattooed on their arms. He says he was 5 or 6 when he asked, "Mommy, when do I get my number?" He writes that he got his answer about what it meant to be a survivor from one of the greatest Torah scholars in modern history, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. This is how he puts it. This Gadol Hador, the greatest sage of his generation, was so renowned he was referred to simply as Rav Moshe. The closest I came to this legend was at Yeshiva University High School, where my Rebbe was his son-in-law, Rabbi Moshe Tendler. Rabbi Tendler and every other rabbi would speak of Rav Moshe in awe-stricken tones, usually reserved for biblical forefathers. One summer, I was spending a week with my aunt and uncle in upstate Ellenville. Uncle David and Aunt Saba, survivors themselves, as the doctor and nurse in charge of the concentration camp infirmary, had managed to save the lives of innumerable inmates, including my mother and sister. After the war, they had set up a medical practice in this small Catskill village where I discovered, to my amazement, they had one celebrity patient, Rav Moshe. My aunt mentioned casually that Rav Moshe had an appointment the next day. Would I like to meet him? Would I? It was like asking me, would I like to meet God? I couldn't sleep that night. I agonized over what I should wear. Should I approach him? What should I say? Should I mention that his son-in-law was my Rebbe? Should I speak to him in English or my rudimentary Yiddish? I was seated in the waiting room. It seemed like an eternity. I had the best clothing on. With an hour before his appointment, he eventually arrived, accompanied by an assistant at each side. He didn't notice me. I was frozen. I had intended to rise deferentially when he entered, but I didn't. I had prepared a few sentences that I had repeatedly memorized, but I sensed that my heart was beating too quickly for me to speak calmly. My aunt was addressing him irreverently. I was mortified. Then it got even worse. My aunt had heard the chime when he entered and came out of the office to greet him. "Rabbi Feinstein, did you meet my nephew Ike? Can you believe a Shagitz, unobservant like me, has a yeshiva bacher student in the family?" Rav Moshe finally looked at me. I was mortified. My aunt was addressing him irreverently. She was joking with him. She had called me Ike, not Yitzchak or even Isaac. Then it got worse. She walked over to him. Surely she knew not to shake his hand. She didn't. She kissed him affectionately on the cheek, as she did many of her favorite patients. She then told my uncle that she would see him in a minute and return to the office. Rav Moshe and his attendants turned and looked at me, I thought accusingly. I wanted to die. In a panic, I walked over to him and started to apologize profusely. Rabbi Feinstein, I apologize, my aunt, she isn't from religious. She doesn't understand. He immediately placed his fingers on my lips to stop me from talking. He then softly spoke 2 sentences in Yiddish that I will remember to my dying day. She has numbers on her arms. She is holier than me. Rav Moshe had understood what I had not. Our holiest generation was defined by the numbers on their arms. May we, their descendants, be worthy of carrying on their holy mission. Thank you.
We started something new this year with a essay contest scholarship presentation, and David Levine will make the presentation, talk about it.
As a third generation of a survivor, we thought it was important to never forget, and not only never to forget, but to help bring the younger generations to the ceremony to help make sure there are people here. And we're proud that part of this, what we're doing today is we're including a scholarship award to the ceremony. And this is going to be the first annual presentation of the award. And we had an essay contest, and we had many of the high school students going on to be seniors next year wrote essays. And after we reviewed them and graded them, and chose the top 2 recipients to receive the awards this year. The first place for the award this year is Amy Orlov. If you could please come up. Amy, on behalf of Sheérit HaPleitah, we're giving you a certificate of award for the scholarship, as well as a check to use for your ongoing academic education. We appreciate the efforts. Thank you very much. Now Larry Schwartz will hand out the second place award.
Marissa, would you like to come up? Where are you? While you're coming up, let me share with you that this is sponsored by the Descendants Group, the Association of Descendants of the Shoah, Illinois, and we are presenting you with this in appreciation for your efforts